Hi everyone, so today I will be presenting my capstone on the reasonableness of victim impact statements in the Larry Nassar case. So I will start by defining what it means to be reasonable, and then I will discuss what discretionary power is in the case and provide an example of a different case of what it means to employ discretionary power, and then we will look at the Larry Nassar case itself and do some analysis on that. And then after that, we will end with discussing some critiques about involving victim impact statements in court. So let's get started. So reasonableness is a logical feeling about calculations that are made during the decision-making process. It's different from being rational, but being rational and reasonable work independently, but also interdependently, because when one is reasonable, they also have to think rationally about the decision, but also have feelings about the decisions being made. So when one is rational, when one is reasonable, they evaluate the relationship in an argument based on how one feels about the calculations made. And then they continue to consider the goals and needs of themselves and others involved in the argument. So being reasonable involves feelings and emotions, while being rational involves logic and coherence and purpose in a decision. Moving on towards discretionary power. Discretionary power is one's ability to decide whether or not they want to exercise their power over another. So we see this a lot in court and the different power dynamics, especially with a judge. So a judge in court has all of the power and has the ability to decide whether or not they want to exercise said power over the defendant. An example of this is seen in a case called Baker versus Canada. A Jamaican woman named Mavis Baker was to be deported for being an overstayer, which is someone who overstays their visit longer than the visa permits. And so in her case, she applied for an exemption for the Immigration Act based on humanitarian and compassionate deliberations, which were considered highly discretionary and fact-based. But due to the immigration officer's lack of interest in the children and only saw her for her mental stability and dependence on welfare, they denied her her exemption. And so then this is when the Supreme Court got involved and realized, hey, this is unreasonable and very biased of the immigration officer to not include Baker's children when making the decision to deport her. And they realized that the decision to deport her was based off stereotypes made by the officer and demonstrated a lot of bias towards his own views. So then the Supreme Court concluded with two significant findings from this case. They concluded that there's a duty to provide written reasons as a component of fairness. And then they also realized that discretionary decision-making must be made in accordance with a standard of reasonableness. So they should employ their reasonable thinking when making discretionary decisions. So the importance of this case is that there's a duty to employ reasonableness when making decisions, especially when discretionary power is involved. And so this brings to light the importance of being, quote, alive, attentive, and sensitive when someone in power is making a decision. So, for example, in court, if someone is alive, attentive, and sensitive, they are thinking about how the decision will impact everybody involved, and they truly listen to all of the evidence and all of the arguments and then make their decision based off of that. So this establishes a relationship between someone who has power and someone who does not have power. This brings me to the sexual assault case with Larry Nassar in the United States Gymnastics program, because he took advantage of the power that he had and used it to abuse over 100 girls on the USA gymnastics team, and then also he sexually assaulted 332 victims at Michigan State University. To end the case, he was charged for first-degree criminal sexual assault on 10 accounts in 2 different counties. One sentence was 40 to 125 years, and the other was 40 to 175 years. And lastly, one federal charge for receiving and possessing child pornography and tampering with the evidence of the pornography, which added an additional 60 years in prison. So the role of victim impact statements in Nassar's case was pretty much the entire case, as they allowed 125 victims to give a statement in court, which took over 4 days to give, thanks to the plea deal that was made in order for the trial to continue. Unfortunately, at the beginning, Nassar objected to listening to all the victim impact statements because he said it would be too mentally hard and mentally difficult for him to listen to them all. But the judge in charge made sure that he had to listen to them and give fairness on both accounts. So the role of victim impact statements, especially in Nassar's case, gave the survivors a voice and closure and a chance to better their recovery from all the trauma that he caused them. And it also gave the judge a deeper understanding of the dimensions of the crime. When the victims gave their victim impact statements, this created a shift in power of abuser and survivor, because for years Nassar had power over the girls and he used it to his advantage. But now the girls have a voice and can share that impact and take away the power that he had over them. So, analyzing the reasonableness of Nassar's behavior as well as the reasonableness of victim impact statements, I think everybody can agree with me is that Nassar behaved irrationally and unreasonable because he did not think logically. He did not think how his actions would impact others. He only thought about himself, and he used his power for worse and did not consider how it would affect the girls in the long run. I think that the United States Gymnastics Program also did not act reasonably because they failed to report many incidents to the authorities. Moving on to the critiques of including victim impact statements in court, many people believe that it's unrelated to the purpose of punishment because it brings in unwarranted emotions to court. But in reality, this isn't right, because it adds an additional fairness because the girls now have that voice that was taken away from them. People also believe that it brings unjustified inequality to the trial because it'll bring in a bias that the judge might change, like it might impact the sentencing due to the biased emotions that the victim impact statement brings. And lastly, the last critique is that it's too emotional to include such pain and suffering in the courtroom. But all these critiques do not match the benefits of including victim impact statements in court, because when someone delivers a victim impact statement, we get to hear additional evidence that might not be uncovered elsewhere in the trial, and it can help the victims move on and recover from the trauma that they endured, but it also gives them back some power that they lost and can give them a voice that was silenced for so many years. In conclusion, the reasonableness of victim impact statements in court stands solely on the inclusion of emotions in the courtroom, and that is completely warranted because in court, you are defending arguments, you are making arguments, and you're having an argument. You cannot make an argument without feeling a certain way about that argument, which includes emotions. And that means that therefore it is reasonable. And so victim impact statements therefore promote fairness and provide additional evidence to particular cases. And here are my resources. Thank you very much.